This is exciting, isn't it?
Here we go, guys, in 5, 4, 3.
Here we go.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Thank you for good programming, and I appreciate the content and really enjoyed every moment.
It's a privilege to have you on your station and listen. It's good stuff. It's very educational.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Man, it is a weird Wednesday. Thank you for being here. It is Wednesday, June 17th. First, I want to make sure that I mentioned that if you live in central or southern Illinois, there may be tornadoes coming your way. There is a very serious weather front that is moving through. Some of it a little bit of it will hit Chicago, but the majority of it seems like it's going to wreak havoc in southern and central Illinois, Indianapolis, up until at least 5 o'clock tonight. Keep an eye out for really bad weather. Tornadoes, multiple tornadoes are possible. This is some bad weather. And they're having bad weather in Texas, too. The first hurricane of the season, Arthur, is in the Gulf off the coast of Texas, is causing a lot of problems there, a lot of flooding. It is that time of year when we are going to see some really dangerous weather. And I know there are a lot of people who don't believe that global warming is a thing. But the experts tell us, by the way, the experts say, have you noticed that in the last few years, the weather has gotten more severe? Flooding is worse. Droughts are worse than I can ever remember. And that, kids, is global warming. Erratic weather conditions that are getting worse. My girlfriend, her parents retired to Arizona, I don't know, 20 years ago. And about 5 years ago, I mentioned to my girlfriend that maybe Arizona was a good place to retire to. And she said, oh, no. She said, don't even think about it. She said in the time, and her parents had been there about 15 years by then. She said in the time my parents have been in Arizona, when they first moved there in the summer, there would be maybe 1 week where the temperature was like 110 degrees. She said now it happens all the time. It happens multiple weeks every summer. You know, I was once going to visit my daughter in California, and I was supposed to change planes in Phoenix. And I had to keep it. This was summer, and I had to keep an eye on the weather because if it gets, I believe, above 115 degrees, the Phoenix airport has to close because the runway gets soft. It starts to melt. So I kept one eye on the weather. Am I going to get there? Am I going to not get there? Now, if I do that same combination, I fly through Dallas. Oh, it might be a little longer, but at least I don't have to worry about my flight being diverted because the runway is melting. If those people who have retired to Arizona a couple decades ago, they can tell you absolutely without question that over the last couple of decades, it has gotten significantly hotter. And those super hot temperatures are lasting significantly longer than they ever did before. So, again, there will be some bad weather from Chicago on down, but it looks like central and southern Illinois are going to get the brunt of it this afternoon. And there is a possibility that we will see multiple, as in more than one, multiple tornadoes. So stay safe and stay alert, okay? The New York Times has finally gotten a hold of and has published some of the text of this memorandum of understanding between the United States and Iran. Trump was keeping it secret, said the text was only going to be released after they signed it, which led a lot of people to believe it was a pretty rotten deal. The New York Times has excerpted some of it. It includes the immediate and permanent termination of military operations on all fronts, including Lebanon. That's not going to happen. The final deal will confirm the permanent termination of the war on all fronts, including in Lebanon. Yeah, don't know if Israel's going to go for that. Another clause, the United States of America and the Islamic Republic of Iran undertake to respect each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity and to refrain from interfering in each other's internal affairs. In other words, don't wage war on us again, and don't send CIA operatives to try to topple our government. Paragraph 3, the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran commit to negotiating and achieving the final deal in maximum 60 days, extendable with mutual consent. Even the reporter for the Times says this is a really short timeline. Just as Randy Manor said, you can't negotiate this stuff in 60 days. The New York Times reporting U.S. officials quietly acknowledge a final deal may not be achievable in this period, especially when compared to lengthy previous negotiations with Iran. And what they are referring to there, my friends, is the fact that the Obama-Iran deal took 2 years. 2 years to negotiate. And back then, we actually had professionals and experts on our side, not son-in-laws and real estate buddies. Okay, and it says as soon as the memorandum is signed, the United States is going to remove the naval blockade, and that everybody, for part of the naval blockade, everybody's going to be gone in 30 days. And Iran agrees to restore pre-war traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. Okay. And the United States of America further undertakes to remove its forces from the proximity of the Islamic Republic of Iran within 30 days. Now, what do you suppose that means? We have a ton of military bases in the Middle East. How proximate are we talking about? Are all of our military bases, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, are we going to close all those? What does that mean, that we're going to remove our forces from the proximity of Iran? We are saying that there's not going to be any charge for ships that go through the Strait of Hormuz. Well, at least for 60 days. Yeah. The Donald Trump's administration is saying, yep, we got, everybody's going to, no tolls, going to pass through for free. Here's what it actually says. Upon the signing of this memorandum, Iran will make arrangements using its best efforts for the safe passage of commercial vessels with no charge for 60 days. Oh, okay. Okay. And Iran is supposed to talk with the leadership in Oman to figure out how the Strait of Hormuz is going to be managed in the future. Oman is on the other side of it. So 60 days, better get those ships moving. Get as many as you can through in 60 days, because Iran and Oman are going to be talking about, obviously, whether or not they should charge ships to go through. Some people have suggested that the toll could be as much as $1 million per vessel. Oh, and yes, what was reported yesterday has been confirmed, that we're giving them We're giving Iran $300 billion so that they can reconstruct the things that we blew up, and also for their economic development. $300 billion. This has been one of the things they've insisted on, that they want reparations. They want us to pay for the infrastructure that we have blown up. And apparently we are. Apparently we are. So we spent, what, $1 billion a day fighting this war of choice? Now we're going to give them $300 billion so that they can reconstruct all the stuff that we blew up. But there's still no money. There's no money to help poor people get medical care. There is no money to help feed people who live at the poverty line or below. No, we got no money for that. No money for that. But we have $300 billion that we're going to find somewhere, and we're going to write a really big check to Iran. You know, I was watching an interview between Caitlin Collins and the leader of Canada, Mark Carney. She was at the G7, and Carney told her that he had seen the memorandum. And she said, "Oh, did the president share it with you?" And he kind of smiled at her, and he said, "I've seen it. You know, we, just like you, we have our own way of acquiring things." So Donald Trump didn't share it with him, but the Canadians got to look at it anyway. And he was very careful, Mark Carney, in what he said, and tried to point out the parts of this deal that potentially are good and potentially could lead to something bigger and better in the Middle East. Oh, he was surprisingly careful and shockingly almost complimentary about this deal. But, you know, he's a pretty careful guy. Wouldn't really expect him to trash Donald Trump. You know, that's not the Canadian way. Tim Kaine, Senator Tim Kaine, spent some time with on MS Now with a Chris Hayes, and Chris Hayes asks him a very blunt question about the war. Listen to this.
Do you think it's fair to say the U.S. lost this war?
Well, it's premature, Chris. I mean, you know, we'll look at it and history will judge, but here's my sense. The U.S. made a horrible mistake in Vietnam by taking over the French failed colonial project in Southeast Asia. We didn't have to take it over. We did in 1954. Our troops fought bravely, but they were essentially betrayed by poor civilian decision-making. Then the U.S. got into a war in Iraq based on bogus intelligence. Our troops fought bravely, but they were betrayed by poor civilian decision-making. And in this war, I've said from long before it started, this is what Donald Trump is going to do. And once again, our troops will be asked to risk all, but we should never ask them to risk based on horrible civilian decision-making. Donald Trump's decision to tear up a diplomatic deal that was working paved us a path to war, caused the deaths of American troops who would be alive today, caused the expenditure of tens of billions of dollars that shouldn't have been expended. And once again, this country and our troops have been betrayed by ridiculous civilian decision-making.
And by the way, Wall Street Journal was talking to Trump about this as he was getting ready to depart the G7 and arrive in Paris, where he has been invited for dinner at Versailles, as one does. And he said that the reason that he offered this deal is because he wanted to avoid economic catastrophe. So he was, at some level, made aware of the fact that prices were going to continue to climb in the United States. that the supplies of oil, even the reserves, were pretty much drained, that there was going to be big, big trouble all over the world. Some were predicting not just shortages of some goods, but some, like COVID, some goods actually disappearing off of store shelves. The national average for a gallon of gas is over $4. And frankly, the oil company execs and CEOs are saying that even with this agreement, because it's going to really take 6 weeks to see if it gets off the ground and everything starts moving, that you can probably expect gas prices to continue to rise for the next month. And that's assuming this deal doesn't blow up. Did you happen to hear that part that I mentioned about Lebanon? Yeah, Lebanon is a part of the deal. We've got to leave. And I laugh because that's Israel, not us right now. That is Israel, not us. And Israel pointed out that they were not consulted before this memorandum was negotiated. They were not sitting at the table. They were not in the room where it happened. And they don't feel in any way, shape, or form that they are obligated in any way to follow the guidelines in this memorandum. So Iran has said the attack on Lebanon has to stop. That's part of the deal. That's not us. That's Israel. And so far, Israel has said no, flat out no. In fact, the New York Times is reporting that in Israel, at least the television channel that is considered pretty right-wing, really conservative, they have started trashing Trump on air. So, here's another goal. What did we earn by, getting into this conflict? We have driven a serious wedge between ourselves and Israel, a country that we used to consider an ally, a friend. Apparently that is one of the accomplishments, shall we say, of what Donald Trump did. Now, Netanyahu kind of has nobody to blame but himself. It was widely reported that he has wanted to attack Iran for decades, that he's tried, at least with the last 3 or 4 presidents, to try to get them on board attacking Iran with Israel, because Israel didn't want to or didn't feel it could do it by itself. And every president up until Trump said no. But apparently Donald Trump believed Netanyahu's claim that this would be quick and easy and he would come out a hero, rather than the advice of his own intelligence service and his own military, saying that the Strait of Hormuz would be closed and that there would be incredible repercussions for that. He didn't believe it. Netanyahu said it wouldn't happen. And the United States, they're so big and they're so strong. Once they attack Iran, Iran will just simply cower. Oh, don't hit us again. Yeah, that's not what his advisors told him. That's not what the military told him. Not what the intelligence community told him. But he knew better. Remember in his first term, how he said he was smarter than all the generals? Yep. So, Israel shows no sign of going along with this deal. And Iran has said, if Lebanon's not included, there's no deal. So, I think this is what Randy Manner, former Major General Randy Manner, was talking about when we talked to him earlier this week, when he said he thinks that there's a 10% or less chance that this will actually result in some sort of peace agreement. But, I don't know that Trump cares. He's out. He has finally gotten what he wanted. he's out. He is officially out. When this thing gets signed on Friday, assuming it gets signed on Friday, he can go on television and tell all of his MAGAs that, you know, he made tons of good things happen with this war, lots of accomplishments, and now we're out, and now all the prices are going to come down, and gas is going to be cheap again, and we are going to be so much better off than we were with that Obama deal. That's what he's going to say. One of the experts that I was listening to or reading, I can't remember, said that Iran finally figured out that the way to get this done was just to give Donald Trump a little something he could hang his hat on. Doesn't even have to really happen. But this memorandum of understanding, you listen to Donald Trump and you would think this was a World War II surrender. Anyway, we'll see. One other really weird thing, like I said, this is Weird Wednesday. One other really weird thing that happened, remember Donald Trump on an interim basis wanted Bill Pulte to run the intelligence operations, national intelligence. And Bill Pulte is a guy who knows about the housing industry. But Bill Pulte's advantage is that he is a total Trump toady. He doesn't care what the law says. He doesn't care about anything except doing what Trump tells him to do. And he's made that clear. Made that clear. So Trump said, okay, you're the interim head of national intelligence. And even the Republicans were like, dude, you got to be kidding me. This guy's a moron. This guy's an absolute moron. Not only is he not fit to hold this role, he's probably a danger to us, to this country in this role. And so kind of reluctantly, after a lot of pressure, Trump announced that Jay Clayton, a lawyer who has a little more experience than Bill Pulte, but not much, Jay Clayton was going to be nominated to be the head of intelligence. And today, Jay Clayton was supposed to appear before the Senate Intelligence Committee. Remember, you got to appear before the committee. The committee has to sign off on you. Then your nomination goes to the full Senate. Apparently, in the very early hours of the morning today, Donald Trump told Jay Clayton not to appear before the Senate today. So Clayton's not appearing. The hearing has been canceled. Even Republicans are kind of scratching their heads over this. One of Trump's supporters, Republican Senator Tom Cotton, was, maybe it's too much to say he was ticked off, but he certainly wasn't happy. Tom Cotton, who is Trump all the way, said that Trump's order to Jay Clayton not to show up today was regrettable. And that's coming from Tom Cotton. That's a pretty severe criticism of Trump. Regrettable. It was regrettable. All righty. Republicans seem to think that this is a delay, that, maybe because, Trump apparently has told Bill Pulte to fire as many people as possible. Yeah. And make there's too many people over there, get rid of most of them. And maybe Jay Clayton, he didn't think would carry that order out quite so promptly. I don't know. Tom Cotton seems to think that Jay Clayton is still the nominee and that he will appear sooner or later. So I guess we're going to wait till Bill Pulte does as much damage as he can. It is Wednesday. We are going to read your text and take your calls when we come right back after this. Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT Willow Springs, is powered by ComEd. Visit ComEd.com/facility assessment to learn more about energy savings.
Want to join the conversation?
I just wanted to thank your station for consistently reporting the facts.
In a world of clickbait headlines, your station is who I trust for the real news.
Call Joan now at 773-763-9278 and join the conversation. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820.
Lady B, thank you for playing that, because even though I told people we were going to read their texts and take their calls, I failed to give out the number. So thank you for supplying that. I will now make amends. The number is 773-763-9278. If you are a first-time caller, would like to be a first-time caller, and are having trouble remembering all those numbers, think of it this way. 773-763-WCPT. Okay? I mentioned global warming and how the weather is more extreme, more dry and longer droughts, longer rainy seasons with more rain coming down, floods, hurricanes that are more severe and longer lasting than hurricanes were 20, 30 years ago. And of course, the warning today for central and southern Illinois, Indianapolis, lots of tornadoes possible. There is going to be a bad weather front coming through. It is, the warnings exist till at least, maybe longer, but at least till 5 o'clock tonight. So if you, there is going to be a little bit of bad weather that gets through the Chicago area, but compared to what central and southern Illinois are going to see, it is a fraction of it. So I hope that you stay safe. I was talking about how global warming makes everything more extreme than it has been for a long time. A couple of texters wanted to talk about that. Joan, not just the last couple of years, it's been going on for a long time. Biggest example might be the derecho in June 2012. Remember that one? Started in Iowa, carried through to the East Coast. But even longer than that, do you remember snowmobiles? Remember when there was a dealership in almost every suburb? The Fox River used to freeze. People would ride on it. When was the last time you saw a snowmobile dealership? Arctic Cat is out of business. Yamaha and Kawasaki stopped making them. And Ski-Doo makes water jet skis now. That is something that I really hadn't given a lot of thought to. But, you know, you want an illustration, there you've got it. Hi, Joan. Like you, I used to call these weather extremes a result of global warming. However, it's now more appropriately referred to as climate change, because the extremes sometimes include extended periods of bitter cold or excessive winds or wildfires or flooding or droughts. So it's more accurate to say climate change, and it is very detrimental that Trump and his administration not only deny its existence, but they have deliberately thwarted and rescinded environmental protection measures. You are right, and I do stand corrected. Global warming was the ubiquitous term for a while, but climate change is what people are saying now, and it is indeed far more accurate in describing what we are going through. Let's go to the phone lines. Our good friend Carl is on the line from Kankakee. Hello, Carl.
Hey, Joan. The bad weather's passing south of here at the moment, so far between here and Chicago, it's okay.
Good.
Yes, I'm happy to report good always. Just a quick comment on Israel and Iran and whatnot. Israel's still not on the line for signage, so there is no peace deal. period. So,
but are we really asking them to sign? My understanding was that we're going to sign it and Iran is going to sign it, and then we just expect Israel to fall into line. I don't know that they're actually being asked to put pen to paper here.
Well, they aren't. That's my hope. Yeah, they're not. And they're just continuing on Democracy Now! The Iranian Guard people have stated that in the last 2 days, there's been 84 violations of the ceasefire by Israel in Lebanon. They're paying attention to that, whether anybody else is. They are. There's no peace.
I think you're right, Carl, and it makes me sad.
It's tragic. Yeah. Yep. But I'm here to talk about women. Okay. That's my main point today. I mean, that's it on Iran. No peace. Women. We just had Trump with the most violent mano tear your person apart from you in an octagon on the White House lawn. We had that. And also we got coming up, like we had in Chicago, race cars, Indy cars all over Washington, D.C. My point is, where are activities for women? Women-centric.
Well, Carl, you silly man, we don't need activities for women because they're back at the house cooking dinner and raising the kids. They don't have any place anywhere.
They don't, and we tore down the west or east wing, and so now Melania can't have a fashion show for the country.
Yeah, really.
It's so sad, but I googled that up. You know, what are activities women centric? Blah, blah, blah. It came up with two things. One, the National Gallery, the National Museum for Women in Arts. Did you ever know such a thing existed?
No.
I didn't either. It's not on the mall. It's about 6 blocks to the south. Straight over from the White House, north. Anyway, yeah, and it's like a hand-me-down. It is a museum, and it's women in the arts, but it's a hand-me-down building from the Masons. It was the old Masonic Hall. It's an old stodgy looking. Yeah. But there's no museum on the mall for women. There's nothing for women. And the only other thing AI came up with was the DAR celebrating women, service women.
Yeah. And remember, from a lot of the museums, like the Smithsonian, they have, at the direction of the Trump administration, been taking down certain exhibits and certain plaques that celebrate achievements by African Americans and women. So, not only are they not being celebrated, they're kind of being disappeared right now, Carl.
Can't that be translated into votes this November?
God, I hope so. I really hope so. I hope it does. I don't care why you vote Democratic, as long as you vote Democratic, and we can try to right this ship. We are listing heavily. We are about to go under.
Everybody go to the other side.
Yes, quick, go to the other side. We got too many people on the port side.
I side.
Thanks, Carl. Always good to talk with you. Thank you so much for calling today. And a minute ago, I mentioned if you are a first-time caller, how to easily remember the phone number. Boris from Chicago is a first-time caller. Boris, thank you so much for calling in.
Yes, I like listening to your show.
Thank you.
A couple questions I have. It seems like always Israel is violating it, but it's really Hezbollah also is involved. Why can't Trump and anyone else just say, Hezbollah, stop shooting into Israel? That's number one. Number two.
I think I didn't say it this way, but I believe it is a ceasefire in Lebanon, which, of course, would be both sides.
Right, and that has to be. It has to be both sides, and as long as Hezbollah is not Lebanon, the Lebanese, I understand, don't want them in the country. They're the ones who are creating all the problems by shooting bombs into Israel, and Israel responds, and it ruins Lebanon. And the third thing I'd like to just say is that this whole thing is a little bit reminiscent of the Arab oil embargo of the early 70s. I don't know if you were around then, but that was,
but I was very young, Boris.
It's what? Yeah. So, this is the same. I mean, we're held literally over the barrel by these people. And it's not quite as bad. We don't have the gas lines as we did 50 years ago, but it's that they can go and do this to the world. And I understand there's a lot of parties involved over here, but basically the bottom line is that if Hezbollah would stop shooting, the Houthis would stop shooting, and Hamas, the three H's, there'd be a lot of peace out there. But they have to stop shooting.
Yes, they do. Yes, they absolutely do. You're 100% right. Everybody needs to stop shooting. Yeah.
So people should, instead of just asking Israel, because it seems to be like I never hear Hezbollah, please stop shooting.
Yeah, I think what's been in the news, and probably why I said it the way I did, is Israel made it quite clear that they were very offended that this deal included them in no way, shape, or form. They didn't have a seat at the table. They weren't asked their opinion. It's kind of like they feel that Trump is somehow dictating to them, a separate country, how they should conduct themselves. And that's what I was. Obviously, everybody has to stop shooting for there to be a ceasefire. But Israel was kind of like, you can't tell us what to do. It's, it's up to us. And you didn't even ask us to be a part of this. You didn't tell us what you were doing, which, that's what Trump does. He doesn't consult anybody because he doesn't think he needs to. I mean, he's the head of the United States. He's the big guy. So, he should just say what he wants to do, and everybody else should fall in line. And that's not diplomacy. That's not how you get allies on board. Anyway, Boris, thank you so much for the call. We are coming up against a break, but before we go to the break, I mentioned not being able to fly into the Phoenix airport because the runways melt. I was showing my age when I said that there is still a problem with high heat at the Phoenix airport, but it is no longer asphalt runways since most of them are now concrete. But I was reading about this at the encouragement of one of my texters. Still, when it gets hot, there is a problem with hot air is less dense than cold air, and the planes literally don't get enough oomph to take off. The engines don't get enough oomph to really be powerful. And it's a similar, like if you went to really high altitude, how the air is thinner and things just don't work the same way. That's what happens in Phoenix. So the general idea that flights get in trouble when it's really hot is still there, but for the texter who is clearly younger than I am, there is a different mechanism. Let's take a break. We'll be back with more after this.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Every weekday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
It is the first hour of our show, and Monday through Thursday, we spend that hour talking about the news of the day and reading your texts and taking your calls. Let's go to Chicago. Ron is on the line. Hello, Ron. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. This year, there is something called the El Nino weather pattern this summer. It's going to cause a lot of severe weather.
Yeah, there's always an El Nino, but apparently this year it's going to be bad.
Yeah. And the exact amount that we're giving Iran is $324 billion.
Great.
Yeah, and when Obama made his agreement, we gave Iran $1.7 billion, and the Republicans were screaming about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, and the reflection pool, we spent $15 million to paint the pool, and instead of a pool, now we have a cesspool.
Yes, we do. I was reading something else because, somebody who knows about this sort of thing better than I do said that before, when there was a lighter bottom, there was more UV radiation that got bounced around from the sun, and it kept some of the algae down. And now that the bottom is darker, that's not happening. Somebody else also, I read something this morning that said for a long time it's known that like the pipes and the drainage for the reflection pool, they're really old and they need to be upgraded. But instead of doing something that would actually help the reflecting pool, like upgrading the pipes and that sort of thing, no, we decided to go for what shows the cosmetic thing. And if that doesn't sum Trump up, forget about the infrastructure that really needs to be changed to bring this up to the level you want it to be. Let's just paint it. Yeah, that's what everybody sees.
Yeah, and it has to do something with the drainage. When Trump is supposed to meet with Vladimir Putin on Sunday, and when they meet, will Trump give him a warning about bombing Ukraine, or will Trump give him a New York Knicks jersey and autographed basketball? We will see.
Yeah. Thank you, Ron. Appreciate the call. Let's go to our good friend Dave, who's on the line from Hoffman Estates. Hello, Dave.
Hey, Joan. Yeah, with the reflecting pool, it's too bad it wasn't around St. Patty's Day.
Yeah, really. It's because it's a nice shade of green when it isn't brown.
Yeah, wasn't there a song even a different shade of was it green or a different shade of blue? Anyway, with Iran, I'll try to keep this PG for you.
Please do.
Another thing to add to the everything Trump touches turns to poo.
Yes. Yes, indeed. I like just everything Trump touches dies. I think that works too.
Yeah, well, I think in that reflecting pond, they're getting in trouble with them ducks dying as they're hitting there because of that.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me since it's not only algae, but apparently it's a duck poo is also making the reflecting pool kind of greeny brown. Wouldn't surprise me at all if he sends the National Guard in to shoot all ducks.
Or drones, a little drone.
Mm-hmm. But, a drone, that's it. He's going to fire a drone.
When you were mentioning about Phoenix, and one time when my sister worked for the airport, or not airport, but for the airlines, somebody talked about Phoenix. They said, well, it's a dry heat. And she retorts back, she says, yeah, so's my oven, and I bake a turkey every Thanksgiving.
I remember the first time I went to Arizona, and I walked out of the Phoenix airport, and my nose immediately dried up. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was just like every ounce of moisture in my body just steamed off in about 3 seconds. I felt like I was a husk of a person. There is that dry heat. There is something good.
Yeah, that in Israel, what are they? They're going rogue now, huh? I guess.
Well, I can't. I wish they would get on board. I wish everybody in the Middle East would get on board, but I can see where Trump's lack of diplomacy, lack of even consideration for some guy who was supposed to be his best buddy, I could see where that would be, at the very least, annoying, if not insulting.
Well, if you recall, he's following when his first term. He did that to the Afghanis or whatever when he had the Taliban and that in the meeting, but he didn't have them Afghanis in with it that time.
Yes, so we left them out.
He's following suit. He did the same thing before.
Yeah.
And then maybe one way to stop it, stop sending them the weapons then. That might cool their heels quick. But,
I don't know.
So you can get to others. Do you realize today's date in 2021, President Joe Biden signed the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act into law, creating the first new national holiday since the establishment of the Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
I didn't realize that today was the day that happened. I do know that Juneteenth is one of those national holidays. You know, if you work for the post office or a bank, you know, you pretty much honor all of them. But a lot of companies kind of pick and choose which holidays they consider days off. And I remember for a long time, Martin Luther King Day, which I believe was in January, a lot of companies sort of ignored that one. And now that's pretty much accepted. But Juneteenth is kind of one of those where, you know, we will or we won't. You have to look at your company's policy.
Yeah, but that was Joe Biden 5 years ago on today's date. And
excellent.
Let's see. Did you see where Sean Penn is going to do a movie about a cop on the J6?
Yes.
I hope that movie eclipses all Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ and money. No, serious. I mean, I believe he made a lot of money on that Passion of the Christ that time.
Yes, he did.
So I hope this one eclipses that one even in monies and that for Sean Penn.
I hope so too. I hope so too.
But and then did you see where Trump was holding hands with Macron's wife?
Ooh, I did not see that.
Yeah, they said, I don't know if she needed a help up or he was unsteady, but they had mentioned about that and keep an eye out for a new bruise on the hands.
Oh, my goodness. You know, somebody texted in about that Macron inviting Trump to Versailles. Macron's the cat, Trump is the ball, and Macron is going to dangle something glittery in front of Trump so he can hypnotize him into doing the right thing.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be nice.
Well, I'll just get through.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. Let's go to Michigan. Ron is on the line from Michigan. Hey, Ron, thanks for the call.
Hi, Joan. Joan, you were talking about the heat in Las Vegas or whatever. There was a story in the Sunday New York Times about exactly that. The Colorado River is down to like a trickle.
Yeah.
And there are 5 states that depend on that for their source of water and for irrigation. And, you know, those 5 states, if I'm not mistaken, they were all part of the land that was we ripped off from Mexico just before the Civil War, which kind of like precipitated the Civil War, the acquisition of land for moving slavery all around this country. And it's ironic, you know, that we went in there and plain and simple, we stole their land. We scourged that land. We ripped it off all its minerals. And now it's down to water, and a lot of because those are right-wing leaning states, at least in the past, they've of course it doesn't make any difference. The Democrats do it too, but they've made deals with these giant AI systems that they're plunking all over the Southwest, and the little bit of water that's left, they use the techniques of the deep drilling for oil, and they put it to suck out the last bits of water from our aquifers. So it's you know, it's like a curse. You know, the white man Spaniards took it from the Native Americans, the white supremacists, Mexicans, and now their nature seems to be taking back the remnants of what's left, and it's it pulls old people there because of their bones. They want to dry out their bones from their arthritis and stuff.
Yeah.
And they bring a lot of their right wing views, and that's why there's so many saturated, plain and simple fascist-minded people, and that are willing to sell off their little bit of land for a few more pennies and forget their children and grandchildren.
Yeah,
so
but I think selling your land or otherwise supporting data centers, I think the tide has turned on that. And I think more and more, anytime, even in the reddest communities, when they discover a data center is planned for their area, man, they raise the roof. Nobody wants these. Electric bills go up. your water supply goes down. Who wants that? And it's not even like it's a manufacturing facility where there's going to be 200 or 300 or 500 new jobs. No, once these data centers are built, I talked to an expert on these, and there's literally like almost no human supervision needed, like maybe one person per shift. So maybe 3 people hired to just make sure that everything keeps blinking the way it's supposed to.
Joan, when you say there's nobody who wants it, Musk wants it, Bezos wants it, Trump and the Republic scum party.
Well, then let's put them in their backyard. What do you say?
But their backyard borders on ours, and I don't want to give them any more land or water.
Yeah, really. Right, really.
It's too precious.
Yep.
But thank you, Joan.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate the call. We are going to be taking a break here, and we are going to get started with a very interesting day right after this.
Remember when you get to work to hop over to WCPT820.com or the TuneIn Radio app and stream The Stephanie Miller Show. Weekdays 8 to 11 a.m. on Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. Because facts matter. You're listening to WCPT 820. Time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Joan, as always, exceptional work from you from, your TV days all the way up to today. You're truly exceptional, and thanks for this great show you have.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
I remember Roe v. Wade and how it was the law of the land and how the Supreme Court justices who were confirmed all said it was precedent and they weren't going to touch it because precedent is sacred. Yeah. Basically, they told the Senate what the Senate wanted to hear. And it had no basis in reality because in a decision known as the Dobbs decision, they did indeed throw that precedent out. We are very near the anniversary of that Dobbs decision. And I thought it was a great time to have a conversation with abortion rights advocate Amanda Zurawski to talk about what is going on and what we need to be paying attention to. Amanda, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
How did you get involved in this issue? Tell me your story.
Sure. So good question, because this is definitely not the way I saw my life panning out. Becoming a reproductive rights advocate was not on my bingo card. But I was faced with some circumstances that sort of catapulted me into action. So I live in Austin, Texas, and as many people know, Texas is home to one of the cruelest and most restrictive abortion bans in the country. And in 2022, my husband Josh and I were pregnant, and we were absolutely over the moon to be pregnant. We had been trying for quite some time, and we were thrilled. This was a baby that we wanted desperately. And things were fine for the first trimester, but then unfortunately at about 18 weeks, I developed a condition called PPROM, which essentially meant that I was going into labor prematurely, and there was nothing that they could do to reverse it or to make it stop. So I went to the doctor, and they said, unfortunately, you're going to lose this baby girl. And we were crushed. I mean, we wanted her so much. And I said, okay, I understand there's nothing you can do to prevent this from happening, but what happens next? And she said, something along the lines of, this law just went into effect here. And so normally what I would be able to do is induce labor since the baby's not going to survive. But unfortunately, now doing that would be considered an abortion, which is illegal because the baby's heart is still beating. So I had to wait for one of two things to happen. Either the baby's heart had to stop beating, or I had to meet the medical exception in Texas, which is life of the mother. So essentially I was waiting for either my baby's demise or my own, whichever happened first, then they could finally provide treatment. Unfortunately, it was the latter that happened. And I went into septic shock 3 days after my diagnosis. And at that point, because my life was considered on the line, my doctor was finally able to stabilize me first, but then induce labor. But it had a profound and permanent effect on me. I mean, my reproductive organs were permanently compromised. I can't carry children again. And, you know, I was just so angry about what had happened to me and what I knew was going to happen to others that I started speaking out. And I really haven't stopped in 4 years.
Wow. Oh, I am so sorry. I am so sorry that you went through that. And, you know, unfortunately, yours is not an isolated incident. We've almost stopped hearing in the news about the women turned away or who have miscarriages in the front seat of their car or can't get help until they're bleeding to death. It is so inhumane that it is almost unbelievable. And I am so sorry that that happened to you and your husband. And I understand 100% why you have decided that speaking out and telling your story has been so very important. One of the things that I know that you know about is how the different ways where abortion can show up on a ballot that isn't always straightforward or clear. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I first want to address, the fact that you said my story isn't isolated. And that's very true. And it's very real. And unfortunately, when it happened to me, I was one of the first patients. So that's why my story made so much noise, I think, is because I was one of the first ones. But this is happening every day to people in this country across all 50 states in some form or another with restrictive care. And we aren't hearing about it as much as we used to. And that really concerns me because it's not as a result of things getting better or this going away. I just think there is so much to worry about right now that there's a lot of conversation, right? And there's a lot of things for people to be talking about. But we know that reproductive rights and abortion access are incredibly important to Americans, and it always will be. And we know that, to your point, based on the ballot. And every time abortion is on the ballot, however it appears on the ballot, it wins. We saw it in 2024 with several state level measures that were passed in very deeply Republican ruby red states. And so what that tells us is that this is an issue people really, really care about, number one. And number two, most Americans do not support these restrictive bans like the one in Texas.
Absolutely. And what bothers me is the Republicans' inability to accept the will of the people. I'm looking at Ohio, where, they went to the polls and they wanted a state constitutional item that would protect these rights. And Republicans, it was voted in. Republicans in Ohio have been doing everything in their power to undermine it, to weaken it, to reduce its scope. And this is something that a majority of Ohioans voted for. It was voted by a majority of the people in Kansas. You're absolutely right. The majority of the people in this country support this. And it really, aside from the fact that a woman and her doctor, here's a novel concept, a woman and her doctor should decide what is best for her health between the two of them. And if the woman wants to include anybody, a pastor or a husband, that should be her decision. I mean, this is such a beyond whatever religious guise this is put under. This is a way to take away the power that women have. One of many efforts in a wide range of areas where this is going on. And it drives me crazy. And you know what drives me even crazier, Amanda? When these measures end up on the ballot, they give them names that sound like, oh my God, something you absolutely support. Like, something along the lines of, everybody's going to have a great family life. House Bill 44. Well, everybody wants to have a great family life. That sounds like something we should vote for. And then you look at the actual measure and it has nothing to do with that. It's just unbelievable. Right. Yep,
that's right. And that's why, it's so important for us as voters, as storytellers, as advocates to, really dig into that material and be able to talk about what the bills actually say and what the votes are actually going to achieve. I think we have to be very careful and very thoughtful about who we are electing to represent us now more than ever, because this year in November, abortion will once again be on the ballot, and we need to be diligent about who we put in office that will actually stand up for us and our rights.
Let's set aside for now the move to create a sort of a federal abortion ban, but let's look at the states. Which states are you focused on right now? Which states should I be paying attention to and talking about on this show?
Well, it's interesting you ask that, because whenever I visit states or cities like Chicago, for example, but states that are blue or areas that are blue, folks are still shocked that this is the reality of people like Texas, right? People living in states like Texas. And so, I think I would answer this kind of in two parts. If you want to know what's coming down the pike, keep an eye on states like Texas, right? And what they're doing in our state legislature, because what starts in Texas tends to spread. And I think it can really be a bellwether for its similar states, particularly those in the South. But also we need to be keeping an eye on the blue states too. And we need to be paying attention to how what is happening in states with bans is impacting people in quote unquote safe states, right? We have to go somewhere to get care. And if we can't do it in our own state, we're going to those blue states. That's putting a real strain on resources in those protected states, in their actual healthcare providers, in their time and their access to medication. This is affecting every single person in this country, whether you live in a red state, a blue state, an Austin, an Amarillo, or a Chicago.
Yeah. We need to take a break, Amanda. I'm talking to Amanda Zurawski. She is an abortion rights advocate. The anniversary of Dobbs is right around the corner. And won't that be a sad day for all of us? We'll be right back with more.
Because facts matter. You're listening to WCPT 820. Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by Amanda Zurawski. Dobbs, the anniversary of the Dobbs decision that took away a woman's right to make decisions for her own body. I can't even believe I'm saying that. That just sounds so unbelievable to me. The anniversary for Dobbs is right around the corner, which is a great time to talk about abortion rights and the fact that Republicans have not stopped waging this war, even when states vote to add protections to their state constitution. Republican legislators try to find a way to circumvent it, to undermine it, to weaken it. And it is something that everybody needs to pay attention to. Now, Amanda, I said let's look at what's happening in the states, but one of the things that legislators have realized is if they can get something passed at the federal level, maybe they can do away with all of these pesky state laws. What do you see happening at the federal level?
It's an interesting question. And in 2024, well, after we knew that Trump was going to be the next president, I was very, very fearful that there would be, an immediate federal abortion ban. And the truth is we haven't seen that happen, right? And I think what that reflects is that this administration and Republicans at large recognize how deeply unpopular these extreme views are. And, although they are still coming for our reproductive freedoms, so far there has not been this federal ban. And I think that just goes to show that they realize that this is something Americans care about, will always care about, and their extremist values are not welcome here.
I agree with you. I think it's a very unpopular stance to take, but they're trying as they always do with a midterm election approaching where Republicans are really worried about retaining their seats, you know, they try to be very quiet and not talk about and avoid talking about the things that they know are unpopular. You know, just as apparently the Department of Homeland Security has been told, yeah, you can keep doing the ICE raids, but for God's sakes, you know, no more shootings, no more bad behavior that makes this front page news. Just do it quietly. Just do it quietly so that we don't have to face any consequences. My fear is that after the midterm elections, there will be no more reason for them to hold back, and they won't. What do you think?
I mean, I think that's a very valid point, and I think it's terrifying. You know, you asked me what states to keep an eye on, and I said, if you want to know what's coming, take a look at Texas. And I will tell you some of the things that I know they are working on here in the GOP for after the midterms are terrifying. And I'm talking about banning surrogacy, banning IVF, all for quote unquote the protection of fetal personhood. And so this is happening quietly, but you're right, it is happening. And I am very fearful of what will happen if these folks are to stay in office. And so again, that's why I think it's so important for us to pay attention, show up for the midterms, and be very mindful about who we put in office.
And it's not only IVF, it's also birth control that Republicans are starting to target. But, you know, Amanda, maybe you and I are both a little confused on this issue, because I remember Donald Trump promising that in vitro fertilization was going to be free if he was elected president. So maybe we're accusing them of going after something that they plan not only to support, but to make free.
Well, I can tell you, as someone who's done an IVF cycle during this presidency, it sure wasn't free.
No, it isn't free. And why on earth should Donald Trump keep that particular campaign promise when he clearly hasn't kept campaign promises up and down the line? This is a radio station, Amanda, where people are very politically interested. They tend to be the people who show up and wave their signs and protest and march and fill out witness slips. What should our audience be paying attention to, and what, if any, actions should they be taking?
You know, when folks used to ask me this question, when we were a little bit closer to 2024, I would say things like, you know, show up and continue having these conversations around your own communities. And I do think that is all still true, and it is very important. So do that, but also do more. You know, I think this midterm election is going to be critical for the future of our democracy, and we need to be having those conversations to be keeping things like reproductive freedom at the forefront of people's minds. But we also need to be helping to elect the right people, not just showing up and voting for them. I'm talking about if you have the ability to donate money to the candidates that you believe in, if you have the ability to donate time to the candidates that will protect us and fight for us, I think it's time that we do as much as we can, because if that time is not now, if we haven't reached the precipice, what more is it going to take for people to get involved?
Yeah, I agree. And what I try to talk about on this show is the wide variety of ways you can be involved. I mean, if you're somebody who rarely leaves the house because of health reasons or whatever, you can be a computer warrior. You can, pay attention to bills and spread the word on your social media and fill out witness slips. And if you are the kind of person who's willing to show up and wave a sign and march, that's great too. If you're the sort of person that wants to do a deep dive into your local legislators, your state legislators, your congresspeople, your senators, and pay attention to how they are voting on particular bills and call their offices. I mean, there's so many different ways. You don't necessarily have to canvass or knock doors, but if that's something that you think would be interesting, you can do it. But it's not it's not the kind of effort where we're going to exclude anybody. Oh, I'm sorry, you don't leave the house. Well, you can't help us win an election. You can. And varying degrees of time commitments. I mean, some people are, they've joined an indivisible group or their local Democratic Party, and they show up at the meetings, and that's wonderful. But there is a place, I think, for everybody. And what I tell people, Amanda, and I have a feeling this will resonate with you, if it seems too overwhelming, find one issue that is important to you. Maybe it is funding for special education. Maybe it is making sure that there are free lunches. Maybe it is a woman's autonomy and abortion rights. There are so many, sadly, so many places where, we need to fix things that I think the way to get people to be involved and not be overwhelmed is to tell them to find what they are passionate about, and just like you did. What do you advise people when you speak to them?
Oh, I think that is such great advice, and I would echo the exact same sentiment. This administration has crafted a chaotic ecosystem that is really designed to confuse and overwhelm folks, and unfortunately, we see it working. And so, I would give folks the exact same advice. Find just one thing that you really care about and be an advocate for that. The overwhelming frustration and chaos that we feel is not by accident, and it is to intimidate us, to fatigue us, and to get us to throw in the towel and give up. And I refuse to let that happen. I refuse to let my friends and family stick their head in the sand. And I think we can all be that person for someone else in our life and make sure that folks stay engaged and they continue to care about our country and this democracy that we live in.
Do you usually make appearances in public? I mean, is there an organization that you travel around and promote? How do you take this passion you have to the public?
By any opportunity that I get. So that's why I'm so grateful to be on with you today. But I do a lot of speaking for really any organization that is pro-choice and that is showing up in this movement. And fortunately, there are so many of them. One of my favorites I'm actually going to be with next week in Washington, D.C. for the anniversary of Dobbs. It's called Free and Just. They are a storyteller organization, an advocacy organization, and they're bringing together advocates from, I believe, 35 different states. And we're showing up to meet with our lawmakers and tell them what's going on in our states and ask for help and demand accountability. And, that's something that is really near and dear to my heart, is working across the aisle and working with other storytellers to make sure that these messages and these stories continue to be told.
And that is what is going to make a difference. That is what is going to turn the tide. Is because when you talk about your story, suddenly all this becomes real. It's not theory. It's not just conjecture. It is real tragedy. It is real people. Thank you, Amanda, for all the work you're doing, and thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
We are going to take a break. We'll be back with more after this. Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT Willow Springs, is powered by ComEd. Find rebates and discounts on energy-efficient products at ComEd.com/home savings.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
You know, if you listen to this show, that I love Washington Monthly Magazine. I think it is one of the best political magazines with the best writing and the best topics that you can find anywhere. I strongly urge you to have a subscription, whether it's digital, whether you get the actual magazine. And a number of people who write for Washington Monthly are fairly regular contributors to the Joan Esposito Show. One of those people is Bill Scher, who has a new article out and joins us to talk about it. Bill, did you know that you were one of my, quote, contributors?
I did not know. Just tell me where to send when the paychecks are coming.
Yes, really. There'll be a little something extra in your Washington monthly check every time you appear with me, and don't count on it. What you wrote about recently is so timely because you're talking about the Iran war and you are talking about this difficult relationship we have created between the United States and Israel. The title of Bill's article is "The Iran War's Biggest Loser? Definitely Netanyahu." Talk about that, if you would.
I mean, Netanyahu has been fixated. Well, let me step back a little farther. I think there's three things that Netanyahu has tried to do. One, he wanted to change Israel's relationship with America, which used to be predicated on bipartisanship. So America would support Israel regardless of which party is in power. He made a decision to tilt towards the Republicans, and that goes back to the 2012 election. He abandoned the two-state peace process. He said flat out in 2015 that establishing a Palestinian state was not part of his agenda. And he has been very fixated for a long time on launching a military operation against Iran to end that regime's control of the country. And we just heard there's a video clip that's been going around from Hillary Clinton just from this week when she was telling a story about how the Netanyahu government was trying to pressure the Obama administration and telling them, well, we have our warplanes on the tarmac, and Hillary said to them, good luck, so she knew well they were trying to jam them into coming aboard, and they didn't bite. They didn't take the bait. So they've been doing this for a long time. Finally, they get Trump to agree, and then Yahoo learns the hard way what almost everyone else has learned dealing with Trump. He does not care about your agenda. He does not share your policy objectives. He cares about nothing but himself and nothing about what satisfies his narcissistic impulses in the moment. So he may have thought it would be a quick and easy strike. He bought the Netanyahu's line initially that they could take out the regime in a matter of days. But when that didn't happen, Trump got off the ride and said, forget it, and is now capitulating to Iran, very similarly to how he capitulated to Kim Jong-un in North Korea in his first term. So no one should really be surprised that this is how Trump rolls. But Netanyahu has staked his entire legacy on this moment that he would finally create a Middle East based on Israel's dominance, the Israel government's dominance in the region militarily, not through diplomatic means, and it has completely gone the opposite way. And I think it's exposed then, politically in his own country, and it just shows the futility of trying to solve these difficult problems through military means alone.
There was reportedly a phone conversation not too long ago between Trump and Netanyahu when apparently he was trying to get Netanyahu to stop bombing Lebanon just long enough to get this Iran deal done. And Trump was reported to be screaming at Netanyahu and using bad words. I think that was so predictable. I think he got snookered by Netanyahu. Oh, you know what? Your military might say that all these bad things will happen, but we'll be in and out. You'll do this one round of bombs. The government will fall. The people will take over. You'll be a hero. You'll be a hero. And I think I'm guessing that was the conversation that took place. And when it didn't work out that way, I have a feeling, because, you may know this, Donald Trump never does anything wrong and he's never responsible for anything that goes wrong. You may know that about him. And I think he looked at Netanyahu and was like, dude, what did you do to me here? What did you do to me?
I mean, the farcical nature of this entire operation is, if you put it in a fictional screenplay, it would not get past the pitch stage. Mm-hmm. I mean, remember, the plan was to install Mahmoud Ahmadinejad as the new leader of Iran. This is the former president of Iran, who used to be the face of the nuclear program back in the Bush days.
Isn't he one of the people we killed that got killed in that bombing?
I mean, apparently he was considering this, this plan from the United States and Israel, and then an airstrike came to his house. It did not kill him, but it came close enough. They said, these guys don't know what they're doing, and pulled out of the plan. I mean, for someone as obsessed with taking out the Iranian government as Netanyahu has been for decades, to come up with this back of the envelope plan to do it is mind-bogglingly stupid. And what they didn't bank on a couple of things. They didn't bank on the layers of bureaucracy that the Iranian government has built up, so that if you do assassinate one supreme leader, it doesn't mean the whole regime collapses. They have layers and layers of people ready to step up and take things over. They've already had an assassination strategy for lower level figures, military figures, nuclear scientists, hasn't achieved the results that they wanted, and you have the same problem today. And on top of that, they didn't take seriously Iran's ability to control the Strait of Hormuz and use that as bargaining leverage. So Trump's been going around saying, we have all the cards, I've killed all your people. And all it takes is, a handful of drones to control one shipping lane, have gas prices go through the roof, and no longer is it a painless activity for Americans. It's dragging down Trump's approval. It's dragging down the approval of the Republican Party. It's threatening what's coming in the midterm elections. And at this point, it doesn't matter to Netanyahu if gas prices go through the roof. All he cares about is eliminating the regime. But this is where their interests very clearly diverged. And Trump's nature is to be at the ribbon cutting. He does not want to be in a 10-year war. He loves the ribbon cutting. He loves
Which is
the
why, I don't know if you
handshake.
saw the announcement
plaque.
today that there may be a public signing of this Iran agreement, not in the same room, but like on television or something. It's just classic. Oh my God.
Can't get up for that. And look, ribbon cuttings are fun. Look, I'm not a warmonger. Peace is better than war. I get it. But to have sustainable peace requires a lot of diplomatic legwork. You don't just get it just over a handshake. But Trump wants to shortcut all the time. This is why he claimed he deserves the peace prize already, because he ended 10 wars. And obviously that's total nonsense. But that's how the guy thinks, or wants you to think. He just wants the candy. He doesn't want the nutritious meal. So for Netanyahu to not recognize, I'm not dealing with the guy who's going to stick by me. This is a guy who always lets you down, never wants what you really want, won't go through the hard times with you. He got severely played. And as much as perhaps Iran is playing Donald Trump, Trump has played Netanyahu. And so that's sort of, in one sense, it's fun to see people you don't like go through political misery. But I think there's a more substantive point to be made here, which is you're not going to resolve the tensions in the Middle East without serious long-term diplomacy. It takes years. It takes decades. These are deeply held animosities. Many people have failed to square this circle in the past, but there is an old adage that the Middle East peace process is like a bicycle, and if you stop pedaling, the bicycle is going to fall down. And once we abandoned the two-state peace process, that's exactly what has happened. It's now so much easier for all these parties to go for military solutions that don't work, that destabilize the world. And we're running the risk now of normalizing missile fire between Iran and Israel, where Iran actually shoots missiles into Israel. This wasn't happening before. Now they do it, and Donald Trump says, don't shoot back. Let them do it. And Israel say, well, we're not going to stop going into Lebanon. That means Iran's not going to stop going into Israel. And this is just a cycle of violence that we all want to see end. And you're not going to get there unless you take seriously that two-state peace process. So I hope someone out there learns this lesson, because the people in charge now are not learning anything.
Well, don't you feel, though, pretty confident that Kushner, Witkoff, and Vance are the tip of the spear for us?
I mean, Trump has always outsourced these incredibly complex diplomatic challenges to the most incompetent, inexperienced sycophants imaginable. It means this is not who you want to solve these difficult problems. And Kushner does a few handshake deals for so-called Abraham Accords in the first term, and they act as if like that solved everything. When they haven't solved any underlying issues. It's always the shortcut to the ribbon cutting. It's never actually digging into what the actual disagreements are about. And he just doesn't care enough to find those people. He doesn't care enough to do the sustainable diplomacy. He continues to disparage the nuclear deal that President Obama, Secretary of State John Kerry worked on for years. Mm-hmm. And it was very meticulous, very intricate. Things that are complicated, intricate, you can demagogue and pick apart and talk about how they're not perfect, which is what Trump and the Republicans did. But by all accounts, it was working to contain that program, and only stopped working when Donald Trump pulled out of it. Mm-hmm. And now it's been it's been about 8 years since that. Trump launches a war just so he could say he stopped the war and bring back and claim that he has this brilliant plan for peace, which looks very similar to what Obama had in the first place. Because he just wants the credit and doesn't care about the actual longevity and sustainability of the policy.
I'm speaking with Washington Monthly's Bill Scher about an article he's written about the Iran war. And we are going to take a break, Bill, and be back. But one thing you said, you didn't think Donald Trump cared enough to put the right people in charge. Honestly, I think it's worse than that. I don't think he understands why people with expertise are needed. I think he thinks, my buddy Steve Witkoff, he's negotiated tough real estate deals. He's got the goods. I don't think it's a question of caring. I don't think he really understands what's necessary. Bill Scher and I are going to continue this discussion right after a break.
Hey, Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's progressive talk from TuneIn.
Oh, hi, it's Joan Esposito. I forgot. Lady B just told me to do this, and I was taking a small nap, okay? I want to tell you about 120 Life. My refrigerator is full of it. 120 Life is a drink made with ingredients that help support healthy blood pressure. My mom had blood pressure, took medicine most of her adult life, and for many of us, high blood pressure runs in the family. 120 Life is a great tasting fruit and vegetable drink designed to improve blood pressure. Put it to the test for a couple of weeks. Check your blood pressure, see if it works for you. Some people reported results in as little as 2 weeks, and I like it because it's a pretty nice fruit drink that isn't super sugary. To try it, go online to 120life.com. That's 120life.com. If your high blood pressure doesn't come down in a couple of weeks, you can get a full refund. And you can buy it at a discount. You can get a 20% discount if you use the code JOAN, JOAN, for 20% off your order. These statements have not been approved by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I am speaking with Bill Scher, who in the current Washington Monthly magazine has written an article about the Iran war and how Netanyahu has been a big loser in this war. I have to say, though, Bill, I know Donald Trump doesn't believe he needs to consult anybody before he does anything. He's the big poobah. He's the head of the United States, and we're the big country. We're the big fish, and we just do what we want, and the rest of the world reacts. But I thought it was pretty weird, even for Trump, to try to put together a memorandum of understanding with Iran that had provisions in it for how Israel needed to behave. And Israel was apparently not a part of these negotiations. If some of the reporting I've read is to be believed, they didn't even know about this memorandum that was being put together. And now all of a sudden it's public and we're saying, oh, by the way, we're going to do this. Iran's going to do that. And oh, by the way, Bibi, you're going to do this. I kind of understand how Israel would feel a little angry about that.
Well, this is where, again, if you're not serious about sustainable diplomatic solutions, you're going to have big problems. You can't create peace with Iran without Israel's buy-in, because Israel is clearly has conflict with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah is Iran's proxy. So, there's lots in the memorandum of understanding about Lebanon being part of this deal, and that we're not going to have a war with Lebanon. But if Israel doesn't agree, then that falls apart. And if Israel attacks Hezbollah in Lebanon again, Iran's going to have a free hand to launch missiles back in Israel, and perhaps could even say, forget this whole nuclear deal that we have because you have not contained the situation in Lebanon. But this is not this doesn't mean that there's no, that's not say that Israel and Netanyahu hold all these cards here, because to go back to what I was saying at the front end, Israel has made this colossal strategic error by abandoning a bipartisan approach to American foreign policy. They decided to go all in on the Republicans because Republicans would give Netanyahu a freer hand militarily. And what has happened is that support for Israel, one in America broadly, but particularly with Democrats, has plummeted. I mean, just almost near rock bottom. And it's now far more popular in Democratic circles to support conditioning military to Israel or cutting it off completely. So depending on which way an election goes right now, Israel might be faced with a cutoff of military aid, which might limit their ability to go into Lebanon. So there's just enormous risks here on all sides that don't make you feel very confident that this peace arrangement's going to stick, because you have to solve the underlying issues with Israel and the Palestinians, with Israel and Hezbollah, and Israel and Iran, because Hezbollah is part of that. If you don't resolve those disputes, these things are going to keep falling apart, and people with militaristic agendas are going to find a way to bust through whatever paper-thin agreements you have.
CNN is reporting that Donald Trump made a statement that he's going to blame J.D. Vance if the Iran agreement falls through, because he said, I made this trip to Europe, I'm not going to Switzerland to sign this. We're going to send J.D. Vance, and oh, by the way, if it falls through, it's going to be his fault. I would love to hope that he said that in a comedic way, but knowing him, he probably will blame J.D. Vance.
Oh, well, I think it's one of those jokes that's not really a joke at all. And for all we know, Marco Rubio's getting what for inside the White House because the war didn't go as well as was planned. Trump always tries to create a framework where nothing is ever his fault. Mm-hmm. He has the right idea, and if someone else can execute, it's on them. But there's a reason why Donald Trump's approval is where it is. You don't get to pass the buck when you're the president of the United States. There's a reason why he's blamed for gas prices being high, why he's blamed for inflation. He promised us that prices would go down as soon as he got there. He promised us that the war in Ukraine would end as soon as he got there. He promised us that the war with Iran was going to be easy. It's always easier for Donald Trump to point the finger when he's not in power. People wonder, how's this guy get elected twice? He's really good at blaming people for things when he's out of power and someone else is in power. When he plays that same game when he's the one in the Oval Office, it does not work as well, which is why he had a bad midterm in 2018. It's why he lost the presidency in 2020, and why he's headed for a bad midterm in 2026.
Why do you think he says he doesn't care about the midterms? And he tells people, just hang on, gas prices are going to come down. And if this is the price you have to pay for peace in the Middle East, then you can just go ahead and pay a little more for your gas. You ungrateful voter, you.
I will cut Trump a little slack on that one, because he said that while he is in negotiation with the Iranians, so it makes sense to give the impression that you don't have these weaknesses, that you don't have a soft spot when it comes to your approval polls or gas prices. You can have the trade of Hormuz all you want. I don't care. That's not what I'm in this for. I'm in this to end your nuclear program. So I don't care what kind of pain you inflict on me. That's my North Star, and I'm going to get it. And the problem with Trump is not that he said it. The problem is no one believes him. And that's why Iran said, okay, we're just going to keep holding on to the Strait of Hormuz until you cry uncle, and that's what happened. So it makes sense to claim you have a higher purpose in your negotiation. The problem with Trump is that he really doesn't have one. He just wants the ribbon cutting. He just wants the plaudits. Doesn't really have an interest in sustainable policy.
What you said something earlier about, this could all blow up and we could start restricting the munitions that we send to Israel. But the conservative Jewish population in the United States, a conservative, extremely wealthy Jewish population in the United States, has given Trump a whole lot of money so that he doesn't impair in any way, shape, or form the munitions we send, the support we send and offer to Israel. That would kind of be going against the very people who funded his campaign, don't you think?
Well, there are a lot of people that funded Trump's campaign. And so, I mean, there are plenty of oil companies that funded Trump's campaign that don't want the oil market in the globe destabilized. So I don't think Trump is beholden to any donor group. I mean, when you're a second-term president, you're not beholden to anybody. You can do what you want to do, and Trump has always operated on what he wants to do in the moment all the time. So I'm sure there are. The Jewish community in America is very politically diverse. Is far more progressive than not. There are Jews who are wealthy and Jews who are not wealthy. There are Jewish donors on both sides of the coin on this issue. But Trump is not going to be beholden to any particular donor class. He's going to do what he feels is good for him, however logical or rational that is. And what he wants, he wants that peace prize.
Oh, my God.
He wants to go down in history as being the greatest peacemaker, but he just doesn't have the sense, doesn't have the patience, doesn't have the knowledge, the respect for expertise to realize that it takes. And I grant you that Obama got that peace prize before he earned it.
Yeah, and he would say the same thing. He kind of did at the time.
And he said it at the time. I would argue that Obama did earn it by getting to that Iran peace deal in a second term. And I think John Kerry should have gotten a share of that too. But Obama took seriously what diplomacy requires. Trump just does not. And that's what drives him more than what any small set of donations, means to him.
And one thing along those lines, because he got the FIFA Peace Prize. I mean, let's be clear. To me, it is so embarrassing that he is so easily flattered. Anybody else who has said, they think they deserve the Nobel Peace Prize and then gets a soccer Peace Prize, anybody else with any kind of brain would be embarrassed by that. And he's like, oh, look, I got that. And it's like a big ceremony. And he doesn't seem to understand what a clown he is, and that people really think that he is not very smart and he's not very good and he's not a very nice person. I am constantly amazed by how low the bar is to gratify his ego. What do you think?
I mean, again, we always end up in this place where we're trying to, psychoanalyze a narcissist, which is, not, my expertise is not in psychology; it's in political analysis. So I always hate being in this place. But for all I can tell you is, we're dealing with the guy of an id of a 5-year-old. He does not operate the way a rational adult operates. And it's sad that there's so many people like, the president of FIFA and others that are willing to give Trump some kind of gift, some kind of plaque, some kind of trophy, some kind of accolade, some kind of ego stroke to get whatever they want from him. And Trump enjoys that so much that it works. And for him, I think the Nobel Peace Prize is the ultimate in his mind, but he'll take whatever he got short of that along the way, because he just loves the flattery and the ego boosting in the moment. That's being the center of attention. That's how he enjoys his day-to-day existence.
He is a strange man in so many respects, and yet there are so many people who seem to believe that he is very Messiah-like. And I think what that says about the country, I find really, really disturbing. And like people say, Trump didn't create MAGA, he just tapped into it. And that may be true, but, we've got some work to do in this country. Bill Scher, I am glad you are on the beat. I appreciate all your writing and the fact that you share it with us. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Take care.
You too. We are going to take a break for news. We'll be back with more after this.
The Thom Hartmann radio program provides all of the intelligence, information, and insight you'll need to win the water cooler wars. Weekdays 11 to 2 right here on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive.
Quite frankly, I get most of my news from you.
Joan Esposito.
Y'all ready for this?
On WCPT 820.
It is the third Wednesday of the month, and that means we are going to be spending some time talking to Spencer Critchley. Spencer, how are you? Oh, Spencer, you have yourself muted, Lady B says. Can you unmute? Well, while Spencer's doing that, there was some sound that I was going to play to kind of be a part of our discussion today. Lady B, why don't you play that psychologist talking about MAGA and the beta males?
Why beta males are almost always conservative. They talk about alpha males constantly. They mock everyone else for being weak, and then they bow down to a man who tells them what to think. There's a psychological reason for that. Bob Altmaier spent 40 years at the University of Manitoba studying the authoritarian personality. He labeled Trump supporters as authoritarian followers. He measured them on 3 traits: submission to authority, aggression towards whoever the leader targets, and blind conformity to their group norms. That's literally the definition of a beta male. Not someone who lifts weights less, someone who thinks less, someone who cannot function without a strong man telling them what to do. Altmaier called this the right-wing authoritarianism scale. The higher you score on that scale, the more you need a dominant figure to make decisions for you. Because independent thought feels threatening to them. Because uncertainty feels dangerous. Because the world is too complex, so you hand your brain to somebody else. Poor MAGA. Trump didn't attract alpha males. He attracted the most submissive personality type in psychology. The beta male. Men who need permission to be angry. Men who needed someone to tell them who to hate. And the moment you challenge them on any of it, they have an emotional meltdown. Crying at rallies, screaming at strangers on the internet, clutching their pearls over Bad Bunny performing on the Super Bowl stage. The so-called alpha male thing is merely a mask to hide the scared little child inside. They don't follow Trump because he's strong. They follow Trump because they are weak.
Spencer Critchley suggested today that with the big UFC fight on the White House lawn, that it would be a good day to talk about what a real man actually is and what MAGA seems to think a real man is. Spencer, are you back with us?
I am. Sorry about that. It turned out that the software decided to mute me, so I had to track down why it did that and tell it
Well,
to
the
stop.
software, is it named HAL? Has it decided that it doesn't want to open the pod bay doors?
I hate to think that software might be named Bill Pulte or Kash Patel or something.
Yeah, really. They've identified Spencer Critchley as a threat.
They finally found me as they sort through the mountain of Trump critics.
Yes. Better you than me. I'm sorry, but that's just how I feel. So we were going to talk about what is the traditional definition of a real man. And I've got to tell you, I don't think it is the chest beating sort that you see at these UFC events. I don't think that that constitutes a real man, big and tough. I think the definition should be a little more nuanced than that. Tell me what your thoughts are on this whole subject.
Yeah, and I'd like to talk about it by accepting the framing of traditional real man that these guys want to talk about. There's plenty of talk on the left about how we should update the definition of masculinity to include compassion and the ability to nurture and those sorts of traditionally seen as feminine qualities. And in general, I agree with that. We definitely should not stay stuck in the past. But there are aspects of traditional masculinity that I also don't think need to be thrown away. And I think that there's a mistake that is made on the left to resort to binary thinking very often, given that men have a long history of doing bad things. We should therefore throw away all traditional male values and, really kind of get rid of the whole gender identity because there's not that much that's any good about it at all. And I think that's a big mistake as reductive, simplistic binary thinking usually is, that you veer from one extreme to another. And I think it provides an opportunity to not ask MAGA supporters to completely change their view of what a man is, but to meet them where they are. If they are thinking about the good old days, traditional man's man, we can talk within that framework. And within that framework, MAGA, the MAGA male as defined by Donald Trump and his followers, would be met with, at best, ridicule, if not contempt, by the traditional males that I grew up among. I'm old enough to have grown up, among that culture. My own father was very far ahead of his time and very enlightened, including in his attitudes towards women and his renunciation of aggression and that sort of thing. But he was also very much a traditional man in that he was brave, he was strong, and he embodied all the other traditional male virtues. And he grew up, amongst members of a generation who embraced those virtues. And in many ways I did, and to quite an extent I still do when we're talking about the good aspects of being a traditional man. And if you're up for it, I'd like to talk about what those values were and are, and explore the stark contrast between those values and what we see exemplified by Donald Trump and his followers and imitators.
I absolutely want to talk about that. And maybe you'll disagree, but I think a great example of what a real man is the character Atticus in To Kill a Mockingbird. He's not a big muscle-bound guy, but he has beliefs and feels he knows what right and wrong is, and is willing to stand up for that sort of thing. Go ahead, talk about your sense of it and whether you agree with mine or not.
Sure. And I would say let's even go closer to what we can assume Trump and his people think a real man should be, which is somebody who is big and physically powerful and even intimidating because he's so big and strong, right? Strong is like Trump's favorite word, right? everything that's good is strong. It's a very strong deal, or he argued very strongly, right? So let's just look at that. And I think that anybody my age or near it, or even anybody who's watched old movies or read old novels and TV shows, is more familiar as a positive model, I hope, with people who are big and strong, perfectly capable of doing enormous damage if you provoke them into a fight, and are never going to use that strength in order to dominate people or exploit them or humiliate them or just grab what they want because they're physically strong enough to do it. And that behavior in itself would earn any big, strong man, traditionally, the contempt of the actual real men around him. The fact that you're big enough and strong enough to dominate somebody else and take from them whatever you want or terrify them into doing what you want them to do is the argument for never doing that. Mm-hmm. If you want to see yourself as a man of, and here's another key virtue in the traditional framework, of character and integrity. So that behavior of, as you described it earlier, beating your chest, the behavior we saw over the weekend with this UFC fight of strutting around and threatening people, is a sign of weakness within the traditional framework of what a real man is. And anybody who spent any time around big, strong men who have actually done very dangerous things that required great strength and great courage, and I've spent a little time around people like that, knows that the last thing those people would do, assuming they're not just thugs, assuming they're also men of character, the last thing they would do was make a performance of how strong they are and how tough they are, and need to constantly remind you how strong and tough they are. And if they did end up having to use their strength in a fight or some dangerous situation, the last thing they'd want to be caught doing is boasting about it. And yet that is nonstop what we get from Trump, from Pete Hegseth, from Kash Patel, and all these chest thumpers at the UFC cage match, to the great embarrassment of anybody who actually is a real man. And so this whole performance of masculinity that we see coming out of Trump and his people, as I say, is the exact opposite of what a real traditional strong man was always seen as. And if people haven't, had the experience of being around people like this or haven't been raised by somebody like this, you can, if you want to do some research, look up old movies with people like Gary Cooper as the star. Where here's another traditional male value. In place of boastfulness, what you got was stoicism, where they would be a man of few words, very reluctant to fight, but if they did, extremely dangerous when they did fight, and then almost humble about it afterwards. The classic sort of man of few words, walking softly, carrying a big stick. Now, often, of course, this is just a role people were playing, but it's an admirable set of values compared to the constant intimidation and displays of supposed toughness and the constant boasting, which just communicates, as I say, really weakness and fear and all the opposite of what these folks think they're communicating.
Spencer, we need to take a break. I have some thoughts on this that I want to share with you when we get right back after this.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
If you are interested in buying a home or refinancing the one you've got, call Team Hochberg, our trusted local lender. And remember, they have nearly 800 five-star Google reviews. To satisfy her divorce decree, Sally needed to refinance their home and pay her ex-husband his share of the equity. Unfortunately, Sally didn't qualify on her own and asked her mother, Myra, to co-sign. Myra called David to understand the risks of co-signing. David explained that if Sally made her payments on time, there was very little to be concerned about. But If Sally missed payments, Myra's credit would be negatively impacted and would hinder her ability to secure new credit. After reviewing the risks and rewards, Myra decided that helping her daughter refinance her ex-husband out of her life was worth the co-signing risk, and Team Hochberg is helping Sally refinance with Myra as the co-signer. If you're considering co-signing for a mortgage, you should do what thousands of our listeners done and what I've done. Call Team Hochberg, 855-56-DAVID, or go online, 56david.com. Team Hochberg has helped thousands of our listeners, but you've got to make that call, 855-563-2843, or go online to 56david.com. ACM Equal Housing Lender, NMLS 643114.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Every weekday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
Spencer Critchley and I are having a discussion about what makes a real man, because there seem to be different definitions depending upon, say, whether or not you're MAGA. Spencer, one of the things that I've noticed about the men that MAGA seems to think are somehow hyper-masculine is that nearly always they need to be superior to someone, and very often it's women. You know, that's how they establish the fact that they're manly men, because they are better than, you know, enter your word here, they're better than immigrants, they're better than brown people, but especially they're better than women. And I think that's why that UFC fighter who won the fight and was interviewed by Joe Rogan ended his statement by saying, Michelle Obama is a man. We all know it, America, don't we? I mean, like, somehow that made him more of a man to say that. I don't get that, Spencer.
Well, I think I do, and there really does seem to be a crisis of men who just are so shattered for some reason. They need to say and do things like that, and I think you're quite right. When you see a lot of this anti-woman hostility, I think a lot of it originates in childhood, because there is this traumatic developmental process for all children where, you know, they start out as helpless infants who are very closely, hopefully very closely bonded with their mother and utterly depend on their mother for their existence, and have to developmentally go through this psychological process of separating from the mother and becoming independent. And if you're a man, especially in the traditional world, you had to go out into this dangerous world and face those dangers and defend your family from them. And that's all very frightening, and it requires a great deal of care and attention in the raising of a boy within the traditional model of malehood to prepare them to take on that role, because, of course, you know, it's terrifying for a child to be looking at that as what's waiting for them. And for various reasons, and I think we could probably speculate about them for a long time, we have a generation of men who don't seem to have succeeded in going through that process. And one of the signs of somebody who hasn't made it through the other side is this fear and even hatred of women. And a lot of psychologists would tell you that that's related to the figure of the mother, because as much as we like to think about how much we love our mothers, there is this, you know, strong psychological undercurrent of fearing our mothers because their mother is all powerful when we're young, and the need to separate from our mothers as we grow up, and then often resentment of mothers. And this happens with both male and female children as they start to try to establish their independence. And for men who grow up thinking they need to fit into society, fulfilling this role of strong, brave protector, if they haven't successfully got there, and they're really deep down still dependent on a mother, and they're still afraid of the world, and at the same time resentful of that mother figure because it makes them feel ashamed of themselves, then that's one of the major explanations for this kind of behavior. Because if you actually are, you know, big and strong and brave and self-confident, of course you're not afraid of women. and unless those women are bigger and stronger than you and are physically attacking you, and if you're a man, again within this traditional model of integrity and character, you see your role as defending people who aren't as physically strong as you, and you have reverence for women and respect for women, and you would never dream of speaking so crudely about a woman. And if you ever did, you would be an object of at least judgment, if not contempt, amongst the other real men within this totally traditional definition of what that is. So we just see these showy, flamboyant performances of what's really anti-masculinity within the traditional model. And these, hand in hand with this is the anti-gay, anti-trans stuff. Again, I think in many cases because they're terrified that may lurk within them. They may secretly be gay or they may secretly be transgendered because they've got so much apparent, evident, performed anxiety about their own male gender identity that they can't stop talking about it and can't stop kind of freaking out about it.
It's interesting. The psychologist, Lucas Bean, who posted that clip that I played at the beginning, he also has a clip on Instagram about the fact that conservatives seem to be much more upset about and nervous about gay people, and tying that to the fact that there have been... there was a report that I saw that when a Republican convention comes to town, there are so many hits on Grindr that it usually goes offline. The system crashes, and how many Republicans have been so violently anti-gay, and then suddenly they're accused of soliciting a male prostitute or found misbehaving in a public bathroom. It does seem to be that there is this, I don't know how you put it, a fear of what they might be, a self-hating gay, I don't know.
And I'm always tempted to say, guys, there's an easy solution. Just become a Democrat. Because, we don't have a problem with you being gay.
Yeah.
If you're not hurting anybody, whatever it is.
That's the key, isn't it? How does a trans person make your life miserable? How do they are they taking a job from you, or how does a gay person make your life any better or worse? What does it have to do with you, I guess, is where I'm going.
Yeah, and there's an ancient history behind this that for the most part has been anti-gay, with exceptions like ancient Greece, for example, when Socrates and Plato and these folks made no bones about being bisexual. And many of their bravest fighters were also gay in combat. But in general, in Western history anyway, there's been a strong anti-gay bias. Although even there we have to be careful because the idea of homosexuality is a relatively recent invention. But it's linked to an identification of virtue with maleness. For example, in Latin, going back to the days of the Roman Republic, the concept of virtue, the Latin root, vir, is the same root as in both virility and virtue. And so virtue was seen as a specifically male characteristic that was also tied to martial virtue, military virtue and courage in battle and integrity and all that sort of thing. And so one of the reactions against women has been this feeling that women will seduce men into surrendering their virtue and being corrupted by their sensual desires, or rendered too soft in order to be brave warriors because they've been turned into something more like women. So there's very ancient cultural roots to this. But a lot of it is more modern because as first of all, homosexuality was defined relatively recently, just within the past 2 or 3 centuries, and then criminalized, and became much more an object of public shame with potentially very serious legal consequences. I think it became all the more imperative for a lot of men to make it absolutely clear that they're definitely not gay. And I think that's become ever more exaggerated in recent times. And I can't back this up with any kind of psychological study, but just based on observations of the culture, I think one factor has been that as men have moved farther away from the experience that required traditional male values, where you actually did have to go out and hunt for food or haul it out of the ground as a farmer and potentially defend the homestead against bandits and that kind of thing. I think that men maybe have become more and more anxious about whether they really are men because so much of their life has been rendered so relatively soft. And I think maybe combine that with all the cultural taboos against being gay until very recently, I think a lot of this is originating in self-doubt. And, there's something has gone wrong, I think, with the psychological development process as boys are raised and they're not successfully growing up.
I have been remiss in keeping an eye on the clock. We have entered into a commercial break, so we are going to continue this discussion right after this. Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT Willow Springs, is powered by ComEd. Visit ComEd.com/facility assessment to learn more about energy savings.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Spencer Critchley is here, and we have been having a discussion about what it is to be a man and why the MAGA definition of manliness seems to be so much different than the definition we grew up with. To me, it seems almost comic in its exaggerated, you got to be big muscles, you got to talk tough, you got to be mean, you got to put down people. I mean, it seems cartoonish to me. And yet there are certainly a part of our population that would say, no, that's what a real man is. I interrupted Spencer, so please continue.
Oh, well, I think that, what I was saying was there's this psychological development issue that seems to have emerged that I was talking about. And then there's the history of the identification of virtue with virility, and they share the same Latin root, those two words, whereas women were seen as, the seat of seduction and temptation and softness and weakness that men had to resist. And then I think there's something that's been happening in the culture that separates us from, say, the generation that fought World War II. Something's been going on since then that has led, I believe, to this rise in anxiety among men that they're not able, some sense within themselves, they just know they're not up to it. They're not up to meeting that traditional standard of strength and bravery and courage, and they don't even get to the part about character and integrity and gentleness and respect towards people weaker than yourself physically. And unfortunately, I have a terrible feeling we might be just reenacting the long historical cycle that hits civilization after civilization that was famously identified by an Arab philosopher named Ibn Khaldun back in the 13th century, which is that the cycle goes like this. You have a bunch of barbarians, like the ancient Romans or the Huns or the ancient Germans or the ancient Britons or whoever it is, and they end up invading some territory, and through acts of courage and struggle, they conquer it and start to build a society. And the next generation starts to enjoy the fruits of all of that. And then that lasts for a generation or two, but pretty soon the culture starts to become decadent the more prosperous it is and the more separated from the original struggle it is. And then you have a couple of generations of people who are just spending down the winnings, so to speak, and becoming ever more self-focused and starting to show all those characteristics we're talking about now, where they're fascinated by performance and they're fascinated by external trappings, whether it's of wealth or strength or power. or luxury, and eventually that society collapses. And you see that on the microcosmic scale within families. You know, if there's the original generation that builds a lot of wealth, and then there are the inheritors, and maybe they build on it further, if that legacy of heirs is lucky. But then you get these generations who are born into wealth, who have no idea what it took to build it, and just occupy themselves with spending it. And then pretty soon, you know, you've repeated the pattern of from rags to rags, which is also seen within families again and again. And I think something like that might be happening with men, you know, since the often called greatest generation of World War II had to meet just incredible challenges and showed incredible courage and fortitude, both men and women, of course. And since then, you know, those of us who've come after have been, to a large extent, coasting on what they did.
Spencer, I'm thinking that, you know, you talked about how this isn't the first time we've had this kind of eruption of this weird sort of hypermasculinity. I'm thinking back to that famous painting of Samson and Delilah, and, you know, where she's cut off his hair and now he's powerless. It seems like this sort of women can emasculate you idea has been around for a long time.
Yeah. Well, Freud, of course, would have a lot to say about that, and did have a lot to say about that. And few people think Freud was right about everything, but I think he was right about a lot of things. And one of the big things he was right about was that so much of our behavior is controlled by these unconscious patterns, which can be understood much more in terms of symbolism than any kind of rationality. And so, you know, the female figure is an enormously powerful symbol, and it can embody multiple things like any powerful symbol can. And so the female can represent, of course, life-giving and nurturing and gentleness and kindness and all of the positive things that we associate with that symbol. But it can also be seen as enormously threatening, and a lot of psychologists would argue because of the all-powerful role played by the mother. If the mother withholds her love or withholds food, that the child dies, and on some level, the child knows that. Or if the mother flies into a rage, that's terrifying. Or if the mother suddenly disappears at some point, or the mother betrays the father, there are all these kinds of things that in the symbolic world of the developing child are just enormously, hugely powerful. So this idea that a woman can emasculate a man, you know, doesn't come from nowhere. A lot of this comes from the depths of psychology. I think in the, you know, today's version of a man, I would hope that it could build on the traditional values of using your strength for good instead of for exploitation, of developing real courage and real integrity and real humility, all within the traditional framework, and at the same time becoming more aware of all the ways in which our symbols and our culture can control us and often lead us to do bad things that we wouldn't do if we became more aware. So when we look at women, if we can grow out of our traditional quasi-enslavement to our symbolic views of women, where, you know, one of the classic dichotomies is women are either whores or Madonnas, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes it would be the same woman being expected to fulfill both of these roles. Or if something went wrong, it would be the woman's fault somehow. You know, if the woman got assaulted sexually, it was because she lured the man into doing that to her. So the more modern version of manhood, hopefully we would be growing into a greater sense of awareness, and a greater sense of awareness of the way all of these cultural symbols can entrap us. And so we can grow up further, stop subjecting females to encapsulation within these symbolic roles, stop subjecting ourselves to encapsulation within these symbolic roles, and being able to still make the free choice to be a good man some of it within the traditional framework of try to be brave. If you are physically strong, use that strength to protect people who are less strong. Try not to boast. Try to be humble. try to be honest. Don't lie all the time, right? And at the same time, learn how to be a little more open, a little more compassionate, even a little more vulnerable, to show people more about who you really are, to allow yourself to see who you really are. And if you're not, strong, or if you're not particularly brave in that way, accept that about yourself and be that kind of man through that kind of self-awareness.
Spencer, we need to take another break, but when we come back, we've talked a lot about the role the mother plays. I want to talk about the father, the male figure, and whether or not the kind of masculinity that he models makes the difference here. I'm talking to Spencer Critchley. We're talking about the hyper-masculine MAGA man. We'll be right back after this.
You're listening to WCPT 820, because facts matter. Don't turn that dial. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now.
A fair balance where the facts come out.
On WCPT 820.
Joining me is Spencer Critchley, and we've been having a talk about this sort of hyper-masculine man that MAGA is embracing and feels like, what a real man is. We have been talking about the relationship some of these guys have had with their mother and how that might create this sort of need to make sure the world knows that you're better, stronger, and bigger than any woman. But I'm wondering, Spencer, if a lot of this has to do with either the presence or absence of a father, and if the father is present, how that father models masculinity. What do you think?
Oh, very much so, and I'm really glad you raised that. And to that point, there's a story that I find is very common amongst people, including Trump, who've been raised by a certain kind of father. And that story goes that one day a man tells his young son, who, it depends on the circumstances of the story, he's up on a high bunk bed or he's up on the mantelpiece in one version of the story, and the father says, "Come, son, jump into my arms, I'll catch you." And the little boy is afraid, and he reassures him and says, "No, I'm here, I'm strong, I'm your father, I'll catch you." And so the little boy jumps, and the father takes a step back and lets the little boy crash into the floor, where now he's crying because it hurts so much. And the father says, "Let that be a lesson to you. Don't trust nobody." And that is a surprisingly common story. And especially I find, sorry, Republicans, but I typically hear this from Republican men, that they were told this story by their father when they were growing up. And I think it explains a lot about a whole worldview in which that's the key lesson that the father thinks he has to teach the male child, which is it's a dangerous world. Everybody's out to get you. You can't trust anybody, and you basically have to win through domination. The only way you're going to survive this is by being tougher than everybody else and basically getting them before they get you. And the whole point of life is to win this, Hobbesian competition, and that's what it is to be a man.
Yeah.
And if you think about that little boy crashing to the floor, you can imagine what that would do to him psychologically, to suddenly discover he can't trust his father, and that his father may just be a mortal threat to him. And typically a lot of these men, in the course of raising their sons this way, are constantly berating the child for failing to measure up, or ignoring them because they're just not that interested in them, or actively insulting them or humiliating them. And according to Mary Trump, Trump's niece, that's how Fred Trump was with Donald Trump. She describes him as a monster. And I think a lot of these people have been raised this way. And so that too explains a lot. These people who are constantly going on about how strong they are, about what real men they are, and constantly accusing their enemies of being gay or cucks and this kind of stuff. And you just know when you hear people talking like that. It's like what you were talking about, the reports about Grindr crashing during conservative conventions. Mm-hmm. Anytime anybody's protesting too much, you have to wonder what's really going on here. And I think that's another explanation for what we're seeing. I don't know why this would still be such a popular form of male parenting after all this time, but apparently it is.
There's some of the psychologists that I follow. They actually have a term, the authoritarian father. You know, that's how you get, you know, how do you get somebody like Trump, you know, or how do you get a MAGA who needs to, and that was their argument, that if you've had an authoritarian father, a father you fear and have to agree with and have to do what they say, that oftentimes that's what you look for as an adult. And this whole idea of, we've all seen it, the MAGAs who refer to Trump as daddy and all this. It's just so creepy. I would get the shivers even just saying it. But it's that if you were raised that way, some psychologists say that is the kind of atmosphere you seek out as an adult. It seems like that would explain a lot.
Oh, no, for sure. And, you know, if you think about just how deeply embarrassing it is to watch Trump around actual authoritarian leaders like Putin or Xi Jinping, and to watch him switch from the performance of domination he's doing all the time for the domestic audience to a performance of submission. I mean, he even adopts the body language of a submissive person where his shoulders drop.
Especially with Putin.
And his head comes down, you know, whenever, this is classic stuff. I mean, if somebody drops their shoulders and their head kind of shrinks into their neck and they're sort of stooping a bit, they're trying to make themselves look smaller and less threatening. And Trump does this. It's like a dog rolling over on its back to expose its belly because it makes it so vulnerable. That's how a dog tells you it's no threat. And Trump is doing that constantly with these people he sees as the true tough guys of the world. And the way he was gushing over Xi, I'm sure Xi was embarrassed listening to all this stuff during that last China summit. And I think you're exactly right about this. And again, so is there an alternative to this? And yes, there is, again, within the traditional, you know, set of male values. As I said at the top, it happens that I've spent a fair bit of time around people like this, starting with my dad, who modeled, you know, nothing like what you might think of, you know, as the sort of testosterone-free, man bun wearing, stroller pushing, you know, caricature of the modern liberal male, right? But, you know, just a big, strong, strapping, athletic, brave, courageous man who was also would just never dream of engaging in all these other behaviors we've been talking about, and who way back then also knew the value of hugging me and even kissing me, much to my embarrassment, but to my great benefit for the whole rest of my life, while he was modeling strength and courage, was also constantly making it so clear to me how much he loved me just the way I was. It was just an amazing model. And since then, just through the course of my work, I've worked around people who fit the stereotypes of the traditional tough guy, brave male, you know, like cops and SWAT officers and Secret Service agents and other federal agents. And the one thing all those people had in common, the ones I was working with all turned out to be good guys. I don't work with bad guys. The one thing that they all had in common was you would never see this chest beating stuff and this boasting stuff, despite the fact that many of them I happen to know had done truly terrifying things in the course of their work and had every reason to boast if anybody was going to boast. And instead, what the kind of stories they tended to tell would be self-deprecating. They'd be, if you were sitting around shooting the breeze, they'd tell stories about when things went very wrong. Or even when some enormously powerful thug they were battling overpowered them and made them feel helpless. Stuff that you'd think that they would never want to talk about, but they were confident enough in themselves and they also, I think, had a natural revulsion about doing the whole boastful, look at what a tough guy I am thing, that they would do the exact opposite. They might talk about how tough somebody else was, but never about themselves.
Yes. I think that's true in all of life. I mean, you get introduced to somebody who's very successful, the CEO or somebody who's become famous. And if they need to reinforce to you how important they are, to me, they're accomplishing exactly the opposite. You're absolutely right. Somebody who is confident and mature doesn't have to go out and make sure you know that, doesn't have to dominate you so that you know that. It's just amazing.
No, it's exactly right. And it's the same, I think, just like with so-called tough guys, it's the same with business executives. In the business world, in my experience, if you run into somebody who actually has a lot of power and they have to make it clear to you how much power they have, that immediately sets off alarm bells. Mm-hmm. And you're right, the most impressive people are the ones who have the least need to talk about it. In the music business, the best musicians I've ever worked with have no need to say anything about how good they are, because they operate within what's really a very traditional honor culture, where if it's not clear how good you are in your playing, then no amount of talking about it is going to help.
Exactly. You know, you can't bully someone into thinking that you're successful.
Yeah, I mean, I remember once in Nashville, I met a guy who was a steel guitar player who had played with all of the legends. And I discovered he was playing on a session of mine, and I, along with some other great musicians, and I was so impressed by these people. They were so incredibly good. And I said to him, my God, I just realized you've played with Dolly Parton and George Jones and Willie Nelson and this list of legends. And he says, oh, I've got around a bit.
Oh, my God. What he should have said is, but I'm most really proud of playing with Spencer Critchley.
Well, if I were going to do the MAGA thing, I would then have said, well, you're in luck because those people are nothing compared to me.
Exactly.
But I like to think that I'm more capable of saying, my God, that's amazing. Those people are just the greats, you know.
This seems so obvious. What you and I are talking about seems so obvious to me, but it must be absolutely murky to somebody who is a MAGA and doesn't see the world like this. I'm always amazed that some things that seem obvious and crystal clear to me don't seem that way to everyone.
Yeah. Well, these are cultural differences, right? And when you live within a different culture, that you're living in a different world in many ways. So all of the perceptions that come in get, built into this kind of worldview. So everything can look so completely different. What's, a very moral thing to do in one culture is a deeply immoral thing to do in another culture, and it's exactly the same behavior. But this particular cultural phenomenon does, as I said earlier, look to me like it fits the profile of cultural decline that we see in civilizations on the way down. And it doesn't mean that we're this is not necessarily the decline of the West, something
or
that's
it could be
again and again.
Or it could be.
It could be. It doesn't have to be, is what I'm saying. It's not inevitable. If we can become more self-aware and try as a culture to recognize that, my God, even especially within the traditional definition of masculinity, this is the opposite.
Yeah.
And there can't be a world in which we want to raise our sons with this as the model for them, where you're boastful and dishonest and performing domination all the time, but cutting and running at the first sign of anything getting real, which is another aspect of this. I mean, Trump just surrenders left and right, like he's just done with Iran. Mm-hmm. He's always surrendering. He's always running businesses into bankruptcy. He abandons things when they start falling apart and then claims victory or blames all his problems on everybody else. We can't possibly want to raise our sons into a world like that.
Spencer, it is always a delight. The time flies when we talk. It has flown again. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I very much look forward to our discussion next month.
Same here, Joan. Thanks so much.
Take care. That is going to do it for me today. I want to remind you that tomorrow we've got an hour with David Hochberg. So as soon as I begin my show, David's joining me. What's the time he's joining me? Yes, he's joining me from 3:30 to 4:30. So please text me your questions for David Hochberg so we can start off with your questions right away. You're also welcome to call in. Also, I'm going to be talking to Barbara McQuaid. She's one of the sisters-in-law, real interesting, politically astute lawyer. She has a new book. We're going to talk to her about that. And Patty Vasquez is up next. Her co-host is Ken Mejia Beal, and she's going to be talking to one Illinois State Rep, Diane Blair Sherlock, along with a bunch of other folks. I will see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Lady B and I will be here. Have a great evening, my friends, and good night.